Hey guys, and welcome to the Human Echoes recap for Better Call Saul, Season 3, Episode 3. This one's called Sunk Cost. And let's just roll right into our cold open for this week. Really an interesting bit of setup here, and some beautiful cinematography as well. You've got this sort of deserted road, which is so ubiquitous, I would say, to this show and to Breaking Bad, that these lonely desert spaces. It's a much more orange than you're used to seeing in Breaking Bad, and I think at first I was like, why did they blow this out so orange? Like, what is this Michael Bay orange and blue crap? I mean, I'm fine with Michael Bay when he does it, but it doesn't feel very Breaking Bad. But then we come to find out that this is actually like a visual signifier that this is taking place in Mexico. And to add on top of that, we get the Alto sign, and the truck that's coming through here. And I love how this truck is represented, right? Because we get all of these shots. First of all, there's a far off shot, and then you get the sort of like smash cut to the truck just like going down the road, and it's almost a jump scare because of the sound, right? Not literally a jump scare, but it has that sort of putting you on edge feel. And then you get the undercarriage shot where you're just like under this massive rumbling beast as it's going down the road. And then as it rolls up to the stop sign, as you see it come up to this place where these sneakers are hanging down from this power wire, the force of the engine is shaking the stop sign and, causing the wire of the power poles to just like creak and rattle as it goes by underneath. And it's a little bit unrealistic, right? Like, it seems probably like that truck does not have the power of a tank, moving the ground, but it's a great signifier and a way to sort of build a tension up for the idea that this is Gus coming onto the scene. We got him last week a little bit, but they're really sort of pounding it home that this guy is a titan in this world. And of course, then there's the wonderful review of the Los Pollos Hermanos logo on the side, which I love. Those happy chickens. Those happy chickens are so great. It's just such a weird juxtaposition between this cold, ruthless businessman criminal and the Ronald McDonald attitude that his store is trying to represent. It's just beautiful. Of course, with that bit of setup and the sneakers falling as we show, which is a great. But just to back up before I get into the Gus stuff, I like that there was this was a sort of a tie together, a visual, understanding of, okay, here's maybe how Mike got the idea, but the sneakers themselves aren't literally connected. Like, they weren't up there for any particular reason in the beginning. It's just sort of setting us up for this idea that sneakers could hang from the wire that Mike's going to use later. And we've all seen that, I'm sure. You're walking through a neighborhood and you see sneakers hanging off of your power pole. I've heard that that's a code for you can buy drugs around here. Maybe it's just because people like to get crazy with their sneakers also. I don't know. But we do get to Gus. And, it's basically a little bit of a backtrack from the previous episode when we saw Mike pick up the cell phone and say, yeah, and kind of cut out, and we go to whatever's going on with Jimmy. And then we get Gus himself shows up, and he sort of lays down the ground rules on the phone. He says, listen, I don't see your gun. You don't see my gun. Sort of like, you're not going to win this in a shootout, so let's talk. And Mike, I think, is in a real precarious situation because he's been outclassed, right? He's been outthought in this little battle of wits he had in the previous episode, so he's not really in a position to make demands or try to outsmart Gus here or get the drop on him. So he says, fine, I guess I'm at your mercy. He doesn't say those words exactly because Mike would never say those words, but that's really what's going on here. Talks to Gus, and Gus says to him, listen, I get your deal. I know you don't like Hector. I don't particularly love him either, but I need him. And he doesn't elaborate exactly why he needs him. He doesn't say specifically what he needs Hector to do or to what position he occupies in his plans, but he just says he's a friend of a friend. Mike, as I've mentioned, he's like, that's very vague, but I can't really do anything because you've got the drop on me and you've got a bunch of guys and clearly you've outsmarted me as well. And there's an interesting exchange here because Hector. Gus offers Mike an opportunity to get back at Hector, and Mike initially says no. And this was maybe my only problem with the episode. And it's not like, this ruined the episode. It just, like, as I was watching it, it kind of, like, triggered something. Like, that doesn't feel quite right, because Mike says no. He's like, no, I'm not interested in, taking out another one of his trucks. And then he says, but, he goes to Gus and he says, well, you need this for something. Like, you're not just offering this up as a fig leaf. You actually want one of his trucks taken out of commission. Now that I know that, yeah, okay, I'm not done with Hector Salamanca. It felt like, I knew as soon as Gus said, why don't you take out one of his trucks, that Gus was probably doing this out of some level of self-interest. I assume Mike could figure that out real fast as well. So the jump from, no, I'm not going to do this, to yes, I am going to do this, did not make a ton of sense to me. It felt like he was just saying no the first time for the sake of saying no. Maybe Mike is at a place where he just feels ornery right now and he doesn't like that Gus has got the drop on him. He doesn't want to do stuff but then as he thinks about it, he's like, yeah, this is probably a good business deal to get into. I don't know. I am glad that Mike and Gus are working together now. It was just that weird little detail of shifting from, no, I'm not doing what you want, to, yeah, okay, I'll do what you want, that felt a little bit off to me. We then cut to the follow-up to the final scene of the last episode. Jimmy is rummaging around out in his car looking for cigarettes. And I thought it was interesting that Jimmy starts smoking again here. We haven't seen him smoking, I think, in a while. And he's sort of got this pressure building up from everything Chuck has been doing, everything that's been coming onto him from his brother's shenanigans. And he's sitting there, he's waiting for the cops to come, he's sort of resigned himself. And you get it, like, he knows he screwed up. And he's running through all the options in his head, like, what's this going to mean for me? He's a lawyer, right? He knows all the sort of procedure, he's been inside the courtroom, he's seen people booked, he knows all that stuff. So he's processing all of this and the fact that he got played by his brother. And Chuck cannot shut his stupid mouth. And you guys, if you've watched these previous episodes where I've talked about season 3, you'll know I'll defend Chuck as, like, I get why he's doing some of what he's doing. He legitimately doesn't, like, he feels like he's justified in what he's doing to his brother, or at the very least that there's this sort of sense of loss, or that he's angry at Jimmy and maybe he has some right to be. I'll say all that stuff. I've never disliked Chuck more than I disliked him in this scene, because he's giving Jimmy the stupidest self-justification for why he's done this. He says, it's for your own good. It's maybe the worst because neither one of them, maybe Chuck believes, if Chuck believes it, he's an idiot. If he thinks Jimmy believes it, he's an idiot. If he's convinced himself that this is true somehow, and I get that he doesn't trust Jimmy, right? That he thinks that Jimmy needs to be taken down a peg. But his attitude here of like, oh, well, it's for your own good, Jimmy. Like, really? Why are you mad at me? I'm not... Like, dude, where did you get off? How can you be just glibly saying, oh, well, don't worry about it, Jimmy. I hate Chuck so much in this moment. Like, screw you, dude. Like, you laid your trap and everything. Okay, fine. I get why, and I understand all that. You won. You won this round, at least. Why do you gotta keep talking? Just shut up. Just shut up. You're so terrible. Anyway, Jimmy gets booked. A great sequence. He's so... Like, he's still doing the processing thing. He can't believe he got played. And there's part of his... Always that tick-tock in the back of his head, whirring around, trying to figure out an angle here. And the lawyer from, I think it's the first season? He may have showed up in the second season as well, when Jimmy's sort of at HHM, and... not HHM, but the other law firm, doing really well. And he's like, oh, man, you've got everything. And then he leaves, and the other lawyer can't figure out why. This guy who he's worked with... in the past as a public defender, sees him getting booked. And there's a great, again, Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul really do these amazing character studies of people who are real but empathetic. And he kind of comes in and he's rubbing it in a little bit. He's sort of like, yeah, you're getting booked, and joking with Jimmy a little bit. But you can tell, especially as the scene goes on, that he's sympathetic to Jimmy, that he's not just there to rub it in, that he really feels bad for this guy that, you know, he is a coworker of. That maybe friends is a strong term, but they had sparred before. He's a well, I was gonna say Jimmy's a defender, he's a prosecutor, but still, like, they're both have been in the trenches together, and now here he is dealing with his family stuff. You know, he doesn't know anything about Jimmy's personal life. Jimmy says family stuff. He says, "Are you married?" And he's like, "No, it's my brother." But you get the sense that he's really, like, kind of taken aback at the arc that Jimmy has gone through here. And to follow this scene up, we then track to Kim, who is asleep at the office with her Mesa Verde folders, like, scattered all over, just sleeping on her desk. And there's a you know, beautiful montage of her going to the gym, of getting her shower, of sort of, you know, getting ready for the day. And I couldn't tell, there's part of me who thinks that maybe they're saying she doesn't have a place to stay now, that maybe, like, in going in for this office, she's lost whatever home she had, not lost, but sort of given it up and gone all in on this, you know, law office. Or, and I don't, so that's one possibility that I thought they might've been saying. The other possibility is that she's just so overdoing it with the work that she's not going to the home that she does have. I couldn't tell which one it was, but clearly she's either way, she's overworked and overtired. And then Ernie shows up to give her the bad news. And I just want to mention, because I didn't mention it last week and I thought about it last week, but I just love Ernie's car. There's just something about that character driving that car, the sort of souped up original, like, Fast and the Furious racer type car, that just, I just dig that so much. I've seen, so here's my vision of Ernie, that he probably doesn't, you know, he has sort of like a kind of an okay apartment. I mean, it's not like run down or shabby, but it's a 1-bedroom, like, smallish, not very well furnished, and not a great part of town. Not, like, again, not a, like, terrible part of town. It's just like, he's not very wealthy, but he spends whatever excess cash he does have on this car. And I love that. It's not even something that they go into, right? The fact that he has this car, and I've known people like that. I've known people that, you know, worked at Walmart, but man, they had a pimpin' ride, and everything else in their life was secondary to that. That's kind of what I envision Ernie as, with this nice little sports car. But he pulls up, he tells Kim he got fired. First of all, Chuck, you're really not helping me here. Like, I came to bat for you last episode. I said, you know, I don't hate Chuck. Now I hate Chuck. You fired Ernie. You had to justify yourself to Jimmy. You set Ernie up to do this, and then Chuck sucks. But she gets the news from Ernie, and we see, you know, Jimmy going into the courtroom. He offers his plea. He's going to do this all on his own, right? He shows up in his orange jumpsuit. The judge is like, wow, how the mighty have fallen, you know? Which I don't know exactly how that works legally. All of the other sort of lawyer guys weren't allowed to, well, I mean, I don't think they actually went there, but the guy tells him later, like, well, we kind of recused ourselves because we all know you. Like, it's not going to work for us to prosecute you. There's too much, you know, sort of past history there. I don't know how that works with the judge. Like, if the judge knows somebody, can they judge them? Whatever. He's there in the show. And, you know, he's definitely fallen a long way. He enters his not guilty plea. They're trying to get him for a felony, like 4th degree felony breaking and entering, which, I mean, I'm not a lawyer. It seems like they would have to slam dunk pretty hard for them to get that to stick. Maybe I'm wrong, and granted, Chuck does have a lot of friends, and he does have a lot of pull, and all of that, but that seems pretty excessive. And he's there entering his not guilty plea, and the judge asks who's going to represent you, and who should come in the door at that exact moment but Kim Wexler to the rescue. Hey, I'm going to represent him. And he's like, no, you're not. And she's like, yes, I am. They have, one of those, I've done this before where you're like disagreeing with I'm married, and I talk to my wife sometimes, and we're like, let's not do this right now, but in front of other people. So you're having this, like, I really want to argue with you, but I can't because it would look bad, but no. And Jimmy refuses to let her represent him. A man who represents himself as a fool for a lawyer, as they say. But the judge says, listen, I don't have time to mess around. If you guys you work it out. You're Jimmy, fine. If you say you're your lawyer, then you're your own lawyer. And Jimmy then goes on, after he gets bailed out, which he does, the judge is like, you're not going to run somewhere. You've got all these ties to the community. I put you on relatively low bond, even despite the fact that it's a felony. I don't know exactly, again, how that works, but it seemed like he got off pretty good for this moment. And he goes to talk to Kim, and I think it's Jimmy's turn to sort of self-justify. He has all of his rationales for why he doesn't want her to represent him, and I mean, all of this stuff that he says makes sense, right? All of the stuff that he says is true to a point. Yes, she does have Mesa Verde. Yes, he did make this situation for himself. But him and Kim, despite the fact that they're in technically separate law offices, are, they're supposed to be a team, right? And I don't know exactly to the extent that their relationship is, that how, if they're still romantically involved, and we don't see them going to bed together, but that you don't have to see that explicitly for it to be happening. But they've got this long history of friendship and love that goes way back, and you can tell that Kim feels shut out, no matter how rational Jimmy is being about, like, well, I made this mess, I'll clean it up for myself. She really feels like that he is not including her. He didn't call her when he got arrested. He didn't ask her to represent him. She feels like he's kind of going off on his own path. And the acting on display here from Ray Seahorn, she has one line, not even like one word to say in the whole scene. She says, okay. After he gives his whole spiel, and his whole thing about, like, well, I don't want you involved. You got all this stuff with Mesa Verde and all this stuff. She just, like, swallows real hard and says, okay. And in that one okay, in that one single word, she has dropped, there's so much meaning just dripping off of that delivery. I loved it to pieces, because you can tell that she's mad. Maybe not mad exactly, because we don't see her, like, break down later on. She's not angry, but she feels betrayed a little bit. She feels like that Jimmy should have called her, and she's running through all this stuff in her head. And I just want to be amazed for a second at how great that delivery. And there, by the way, a show full of amazing acting. Jimmy gets Francesca to take him back to his car. They're just a wonderful little exchange where he says, this is not a typical week around here. She's like, I didn't think it was. I do want to point out, by the way, last week somebody pointed out to me, Francesca is the receptionist that Jimmy has in Breaking Bad, right? Like she is, but it's been a while since I've seen Breaking Bad, especially scenes in his office, and her demeanor here in Better Call Saul is so different. I feel like I can be a little bit forgiven for not realizing that this was the same woman. And there is a part of me, and granted, she's very minimal in this episode, and just sort of a bit part, no small parts, but you know what I'm saying. It doesn't have a lot of screen time, but I am so excited to see her arc from cheerful go-getter, like, I worked at the DMV and I survived it, and now I'm here, and like, I've got this good job, to the, like, dead inside working at Jimmy McGill's strip mall location, calling out drug addicts' names to go into his office. Oh man, like, You would have been best not to apply for this particular job offering, Francesca. I just gotta say, I feel very bad for you that you ended up working for Jimmy McGill. He's gonna destroy your life. I mean, it may not be him directly, but his whole deal, his gravitational pull of moral ambiguity will suck you down. Poor Francesca. Poor Francesca. Next scene is Mike at the doctor. Beautiful little bit of foreshadowing for Breaking Bad, by the way, with the bell and the wheelchair. For those of you who know Breaking Bad and stuff with Hector, it's just this little bit, but you just hear the ding and see the wheelchair. I don't even know if it's the same sound effect. It might be, but it's similar enough where your brain just sort of instantly goes there. Hector's not even on screen, but Mike is there to talk to the doctor. We don't know what he's doing. It's one of these classic setups in Breaking Bad where they show all the pieces getting put together, but they don't tell you what they're building, right? They're just like, well, we got all these pieces. Here's this piece. Doesn't this look cool? Here's this other piece. It looks cool too, right? Okay. Now we're going to stick it together and it's going to be a robot. It's not going to be a robot in Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul. It's just not. But you know what I'm saying? It's this mystery of here's all the pieces. We know what we're doing. We're going to show you just enough so it makes sense later on that we had all these pieces in place, but not enough where you're going to figure it out on your own. And he goes and brings these shoes to a place, out in Mexico, the same place that we saw the previous set of shoes hung up. And again, I mentioned earlier that it was sort of interesting call forward with the other older tennis shoes, but it is interesting that Mike has the idea. It's a weird coincidence that Mike has the idea to put brand new shoes up at exactly the same place where these old shoes were that had broken and fallen. And you can imagine this whole sequence of events where, Gus wants him to sort of set up Hector somehow. And Mike, I would imagine, comes up with this plan on his own. He says, listen, I need some product, some cocaine. I guess it's cocaine. I'm going to assume it's white powder. And he doesn't have, Mike doesn't do drugs. Somehow he doesn't do drugs. He stays up all night, but he never does any cocaine or like the super trucker pills or anything that keep you awake. How do you do it, Mike? You and Batman. What's going on with that? But he sets this whole thing up out there in the desert, and all the pieces coming together. Again, it's several different scenes, but getting the product, going out to the desert, putting the product in the shoe, throwing it up on the wire. I'm glad, by the way, it took several times for him to get the thing up there onto the wire, because it would take me several times. Like, that's not an easy trick shot to make. But he finally does get it up there, and you're still like, what's going on? What's going on? And then you get the truck, the moment with the truck, and you see Mike out there. He's got his rifle trained on these guys. Is he going to take him out? Is he going to shoot him? They're going and hiding their guns at the place, right before they get to the border, which we've seen in, I think, early season 2 or late season 1 with that really beautiful oneer where the guy comes up to the border and he has dropped off his stuff, and, you have that scene of him going across the border and they don't catch him, right? There's no consequences there. We know how these supply runs work and that these guys can do this without getting caught. But he sets them up and you think, is he going to shoot him? And then he starts firing into the air. And again, there's all your pieces falling together, but you don't know what they're building yet. And then you see the guys say, oh, but it's hunters. And it starts to click a little bit that Mike is trying to desensitize them to the sound of these gunshots, because he's going to shoot one more time and he's not shooting at them, but he is going to get them caught. And he has the product in the shoe. By the way, Mike, it's pretty ballsy. You knew you were going to get it in one shot, huh? The wind wasn't going to be blowing those things. There wasn't going to be any need for a second. I'm just saying, wow, that was a pretty precision operation you had going on. But he shoots out the shoe. Of course, it does work. And the cocaine or whatever it was falls down on the truck, scatters all over the back bumper. And as we see, the guys get caught. Beautiful operation. Again, Mike is in full form. Love seeing him do his thing. And that's it for Mike for this episode. Jimmy, on the other hand, is trying to get information on what Chuck is doing. And he goes back to the courthouse. Great setup, by the way. Again, a callback to earlier season with the coffee cup montage. We see the coffee cup inside of the coffee cup machine. The other lawyer, the bald lawyer, getting his coffee, eating his bag of Funyuns and Cheetos, and drinking his courthouse coffee. And Jimmy comes up and sits next to him, and it's just such a like subtle, passive-aggressive / really quiet bribe where Jimmy sits down with these like nice fries and giant burger, and he's like, "So, you got my case?" And of course, he, bald lawyer doesn't, as I mentioned earlier. They all recuse themselves because they know Jimmy and they know that that's going to be a problem for the court. And he finds out that Chuck has someone named Haig working on the case who looked familiar to me. I feel like it's someone that we've seen in previous seasons, but I didn't look up on IMDb where she's been previously in Breaking Bad. She's not from Mesa Verde. I don't know where I've seen her before, and maybe I haven't, but it seemed like her face rung a bell. And, Jimmy finds out that she's doing this. He completes his very stealthy bribe, gives the hamburger off to the other lawyer, which I love the power play there too. Just in addition to him, like using it as a bribe, there's also this moment of like, hey, look, I can afford this nice burger and fries. I'm still doing better than you, even though I left Mesa Verde. What? He can't. There's so many layers to that little interaction where he's simultaneously rubbing it in that he's doing better than this guy, and also hey, you want some of this? I got burgers for days, man. Just give me the information I want. We do see, though, Chuck and Haig talking over Jimmy's case. She kind of gets the information from Chuck. Chuck downplays, he downplays the violence aspect of it. I mean, not that Jimmy did hit him, but he's very measured here in how he's going after Jimmy. And you find out why as the scene progresses and as the story progresses, because he says, listen, we could go after him for this felony, and he has this great, I say great, I mean, this is the episode where I've hated Chuck more than I've hated him ever, and it does not stop here, because not only has he played Jimmy in the, final season finale and all the stuff that he's been doing up until now, he's playing this woman. Like, he had this plan, I think, from day one. He wants to get Jimmy disbarred. He wants to take the machine gun away from the chimp. And it's a very clear path for him. But he plays it like, maybe we shouldn't try to put him in jail. What if we offered him this deal where he confesses to all this stuff and goes, and as we find out later, the circumstances of the deal. And the way he plays up the empathetic hurt, we don't really want to hurt Jimmy too bad kind of thing for this lawyer with the plan that he knows he'd had the whole time, just really grinds my gears. Everything about Chuck in this episode is slimy. Anyway, as I mentioned, and as Jimmy tells Chuck in the final scene, beautifully lit, by the way. I love how this is set up. We have an echo of, I think, season 1, episode 1. Jimmy and Kim meet outside of HHM, and they're in the parking garage in that beautiful chiaroscuro shot where the light's painting a big, stripe on the wall, and Kim's face isn't even there, and her and Jimmy are just sharing a cigarette, clearly old friends. And like a weird echo to that, they lean up against this wall, and now it's not dark, but they're the silhouettes against the wall. The wall behind them is lit up. It's this nice glass wall, beautiful, just wonderful the way they sort of picked that. I mean, use that location. The location's there. The glass wall's always been there, but the way they used what they had and sort of lit up this area behind Kim and Jimmy, and now they're, in this, a different type of noir setting, once again, sharing a cigarette, terrible cigarette, as Kim mentions, and Jimmy lays out, what Chuck did to him and what the plan is, and he finally grasps that Chuck is going to try to get him disbarred. And I think less so the plot-wise here, because if you watch Breaking Bad, and even the fact that you know that this is a prequel to Breaking Bad and Jimmy's in there as a lawyer, he can't get disbarred. Like that, the bar is not going to just accept he's operating under a different name. Well, I guess our disbarment doesn't work anymore. Like changing his name to to Saul Goodman is not going to make a huge difference in what his legal status is. So obviously something happens between now and then that sort of changes up how he's able to operate under the law. But the dramatic thrust of this scene is that Kim says, listen, I'm going to help you. Like, let me help you. We're together in this. We're friends. We're lovers. Like, we've been through so much more than this before. You can't shut me out now. And Jimmy lets her in. And she mentions the title of the episode, sort of the sunk cost fallacy, the idea that really she's throwing good money after bad. She's already lost on the Jimmy McGill gamble. And she's still sitting at the table thinking she can turn it around. And she knows. Like, the fact that she calls herself out on this means that she knows it's not going to work. In her heart, in the bottom of her soul, she knows Jimmy's not going to become a better man. But she can't let herself just give up on him because he is her friend. And really a sweet ending to this episode. Granted, we are about to see them go off to war, and it's kind of like a hook for that. But I did like that she's in for a penny, in for a pound here, and that she's willing to stick with him. Granted, it's going to be set up for big heartbreak later on. She knows it. We know it. As viewers, clearly they're not gonna stay together long term. Something's gonna break these guys up. But at this moment, it's great to see them standing together. And just the relationship there is such a good one. And we don't even see that much. Well, I mean, I guess we get the scene in the courtroom and then this scene so there's some stuff between them, but the way they make what they have work over time, it feels like we've known these people for years and years, not just because the show's been going on for years and years, but like in a single scene, you understand their dynamic and what they mean to each other, what he means to her and vice versa, and how they're trying to balance out their who they are with who the other person is and where the relationship is going to take them. And I don't know, it's just something beautiful about that. It's tragic because, again, we know that it's not going to last. But for me, it's hopeful that they kept trying. That Kim, despite the fact that she knows things aren't going to work out, is still willing to give Jimmy a chance. And especially contrasting that with Chuck and the relationship he's lost there. And I didn't mention it, but that scene where, they're outside Chuck's house, and Jimmy says to Chuck, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to be gone out of your life. Like, I'm done with you now. You're going to fall or have some kind of a breakdown. Somebody's going to find you in your space blanket. They're going to take you to the hospital. You're going to get scanned by these machines and you're going to die. And it really feels like, Breaking Bad could absolutely sort of revive this somehow. Not Breaking Bad, but Better Call Saul, I mean. They could absolutely revive the relationship somehow. But in this moment, it feels like Jimmy and Chuck are done essentially forever. Not that they won't see each other again, but as brothers, as people who can sort of commiserate with each other, that maybe understand each other, that's completely over with. And I'm excited to see where their relationship goes now. There is nothing I want more in the world than Jimmy and Chuck in a courtroom facing off against each other. I really want them to straight up being the lawyers on opposite sides of the case, and the dynamic there. I mean, that is something that I want more than Game of Thrones fans want the Clegane brothers to fight. Okay, that would be the epic ultimate showdown, but we're getting close to that with Chuck potentially testifying against Jimmy in court. We're going to court. All right, Jimmy and Chuck facing off against each other in court. Jimmy interviewing Chuck in court? Are you serious? Or maybe not directly because Kim is going to help him, right? She's going to be his witness. But still, Kim and Jimmy up against Chuck in court is going to be epic. Him on the stand, them questioning him, maybe pulling some weird tactics where they just leave him up there for as long as they possibly can to roast under fluorescent lights. I'm on board with that. Yes, please. Chuck sucks. Put him under all the fluorescent lights. Let him roast alive in his electro-hating body. Oh, that's all coming up, guys. And I cannot wait. As always, love to read your comments. Try to respond to all of them. Some really great thoughts. And as the mentioning me missing Francesca, somebody pointed that out to me in the comments. Really appreciate that. Stuff I've missed, let me know. You guys are the best. And I will see you guys next week with another episode of the Better Call Saul recap. Take care.